Joining us now, Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul. Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
All right, I want to start by this report of a U.S. general, a top general, who is making a comment about a potential war with China in 2025. Get your reaction to this. NBC News is citing a memo to his officers with this quote. They say, "I hope I am wrong," he says to them. "My gut tells me we'll fight in 2025. Now, that's being met with a lot of different reactions, some skepticism. This is attributed to the opinion of one man. What do you make of that, and how do you think that's going to be received in China?
Well, I hope he's wrong as well. I think he's right, though, unfortunately. I mean, China is mounting...
Wait, an actual war?
Well, I think China is looking at reunification of Taiwan, right? That's how they call it. There are several ways to do that. The first one is to influence the election that will take place a year from today. President Tsai's party is running for re-election. China is hitting them hard, saying they're a proxy of the United States to go to war with China. If they succeed in that effort, like Hong Kong, without a shot fired, but if they don't win in that one, they are going to look at a military invasion, in my judgment. We have to be prepared for this. And it could happen, I think, as long as Biden is in office, projecting weakness, as he did with Afghanistan that led to Putin invading Ukraine, that the odds are very high we could see a conflict with China and Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific. This goes back to my father's war, World War II.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because those things are all interconnected. Let's talk about Ukraine and these tanks that we're sending over. You have said there's going to be a winter offensive by Russia. These tanks are needed in the Donbass region. But this is what the Pentagon said this week about when they may actually get there.
We just don't have these tanks available in excess in our U.S. stocks, which is why it is going to take months to transfer these M1 A2 Abrams to Ukraine.
Okay, so there's another estimate that says up to a year for them to get there. It doesn't help Ukraine in the short term. And do you worry about what that telegraphs to bad actors like China about our ability to be ready?
Well, the better Ukraine does against Russia, the more deterrence against China. That's very clear and an important point. With respect to the tanks, all that was necessary is the United States to give the signal that we're going to do this, to unleash the Leopard tanks that are in Germany, in Finland, in the Netherlands, but 10 other countries that needed permission to put their tanks in. The Leopards can be put in tomorrow and today, actually. The Abrams tanks need more logistics supply, training. So I wouldn't, the key was to commit Abrams tanks to unleash the Leopards. The Leopards are going to go in almost immediately. What's important, Shannon, is that Putin has changed his new general. He took the butcher of Syria out, new general in to do an offensive in the winter, spring, and now Ukraine needs the resources to do a counteroffensive against Russia.
So this talk about our ability to send them armaments on whatever time schedule raises this question about our military production and capability. There's a new study this week. It's sounding an alarm about that. The Wall Street Journal quotes this, and it says the protracted conflict has exposed the strategic peril facing the U.S. as weapons inventories fall to a low level and defense companies aren't equipped to replenish them rapidly. Now, this goes back to your issue with China as well, because the study says that we could run out of precision missiles and advanced technology in less than a week if we get into a conflict with Taiwan. That's a shocking assessment. Do you agree with it, and how worried are you about that?
Very. Our defense industrial base is broken. I signed off on all foreign military weapon sales 3 years ago that have yet to go into Taiwan. So we need that deterrence. But if we don't have the weapons, that's critical for deterrence. I would say that also, a third of this supplemental has gone into our ability to replenish our stockpiles and modernize our defense. A third of that to make new weapons, and a third into Ukraine. But it's important to know that the NATO eastern flank has put the Russian military into Ukraine as we backfill NATO to modernize their military.
Okay, let's talk about the debt ceiling, because the defense spending is a big chunk of that and part of that conversation. We're going to talk with your colleague, Democrat Congressman Adam Smith, in just a minute. And here's what he said about the GOP plan for dealing with the debt ceiling.
The real worry, however, is the approach that the radical MAGA extremists in the Republican conference want to take, and the McCarthy is willing to go along with, which is to shut down the government.
He talks about not passing appropriations bills or a short-term funding measure, refusing to raise the debt ceiling, triggering a fiscal crisis. How do you respond?
I don't think we're going to see a shutdown. I mean, McCarthy talked to him. He's going to meet with the president, wants a reasonable debt ceiling to counter, irresponsible government spending. I agree with Adam in this sense that I will not sit back and watch our defense being cut at such a dangerous time in our history. I haven't seen anything like this, Shannon, since World War II, my dad's war. I mean, you have one dictator, largest invasion in Europe since World War II, the other dictator threatening the Pacific that the greatest generation liberated, and now these two, and Iran and North Korea, are trying to redraw the maps that the Yalta Conference brought to us.
We'll talk more with Congressman Smith about that coming up, but I also want to make sure to touch on the classified documents. So former Vice President Pence is the newest to come forward and say, hey, we've discovered something. There was a briefing for senators this week with the Director of National Intelligence. They came out in a bipartisan way, very frustrated and angry about what they weren't able to see. Here's what GOP Senator Tom Cotton said after the briefing.
Until the administration stops stonewalling Congress, there will be pain as a consequence.
So he says he's going to shut down some Senate business, potentially withhold judicial nominees, block them. Do you think that's the right approach? And what role of oversight should Congress have with these documents?
I agree with Tom Cotton. I mean, we're a separate branch of government. Article 1, the first article under the Constitution, and this administration has not shared these classified documents with the Intelligence Committee. I have access to those as well. I haven't seen anything to put all this in the proper context. First of all, I don't understand people taking classified documents home. If I did that, I'd be prosecuted. But having said that, where's the archivist through all this? Why isn't he or she in the room when the president, vice president are packing their boxes up? How did this happen? But more importantly, the Biden Center, $30 million from China at the time at University of Pennsylvania. Biden Center is being stood up. I have a lot of questions. I sent a letter to Secretary Blinken, who was the manager of that. The government in exile, the shadow government waiting. Did they have access to these documents? What were in the documents? Did they meet with foreign nation adversary actors from China? We don't know. But that's a very serious allegation that I think the American people deserve to know what happened.
Let us know if you get answers.
I will.
We'd like to know as well. Chairman, thank you for joining us again on
Thanks,
Fox News
Shannon.
Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.